My own mother asked me to sit down and comfort the woman who stole my boyfriend, while the whole town pretended nothing had ever happened. Now, pour yourself some tea, child, and sit with me a while. This isn't a short tale. It stretches over decades, across state lines, through births and weddings and one very long silence. And it all began when I was 18 and thought my life was finally lining up just right. Back then, our three families were like roots of the same old tree. There was my family, Mama, Daddy, my two brothers, my two sisters, and me. Across town were the Martins, and just around the corner, the Bakers. Our parents went to school together, married around the same time, and ended up raising all of us side by side. From the outside, it looked like something out of a small-town postcard. Holidays together. Shared vacations. Aunt and uncle, used for people who weren't blood at all. Have you ever had that kind of family tangle, where you can't quite tell where yours ends and somebody else's begins? The Martins had a daughter my age, Lena. She and I were born 6 weeks apart, and our mothers liked to claim they synchronized their pregnancies on purpose. We learned to walk in the same living rooms. Shared crayons, secrets, and scraped knees. By high school, if you saw one of us, you saw the other. Teachers joked about us being a set. The Bakers had 2 boys, James, the older one, and Daniel, who was 2 years ahead of me. When I was 15, Daniel asked me to a movie and my daddy sat on the porch with a shotgun across his lap just to make a point. We still laugh about that part. Or we did, once. Daniel became my first real love. It wasn't some little crush. At 16, I was planning the color of our kitchen. By 18, we'd been together 3 years. He was in his sophomore year at college, driving home every weekend in a beat-up car that smelled like fast food and motor oil. I thought the smell of that car was what future smelled like. Our parents adored him. Mama would hand him a plate before she handed my own brothers one. "That boy is going to be your husband one day," she'd say, winking at me while she topped off his sweet tea. And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? We'd already whispered about getting married after I finished school. I dreamed of maybe a small college, maybe a little starter house nearby, maybe children with his eyes. I didn't need a big life. I just wanted a steady one, full of familiar faces and Sunday dinners and cousins running underfoot. And then one September, the ground under all those plans quietly split open. It started with Lena. She'd been dating a boy from another town, Vince. Things seemed serious until they weren't. They broke up toward the end of junior year. A few months later, right as senior year began, I noticed Lena turning pale and tired, drifting away from our usual chatter like someone had turned the volume down on her spirit. One afternoon in my bedroom, she blurted it out. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, like the word itself might shatter the window glass. My heart stopped for her. "Is it Vince's?" I asked, because who else could it be? She looked away, then back, and said, "Let's just say it is. Please don't ask any more." Her eyes were already swollen from crying. She made me promise not to say a word to anyone, not even my own mama. So I wrapped my arms around her, and I promised. After all, this was my girl. I would have walked through fire for her. I stood by her side as she told her parents. They were upset, of course, but they said they'd support whatever choice she made. She chose to keep the baby. From that moment on, I tried to be everywhere she needed me to be. I went with her to appointments. I held her hair back during morning sickness. When kids at school whispered and snickered, I squared my shoulders and walked right beside her down that hallway, daring anyone to say something within earshot. Have you ever loved a friend so much that their shame feels heavier on your shoulders than on their own? We painted the nursery together in a soft yellow. I threw her a tiny baby shower in my parents' living room with dollar store decorations and homemade cupcakes. We took a parenting class together at the community center, more for moral support than anything else. We even picked names together. There was one name we both fell in love with for a girl, Mara. Strong, but gentle, Lena said, running her hand over her belly. If it's a girl, that's her. And I'll be the best aunt she ever had, I promised, feeling proud of myself for standing so firm for my friend. Now, while all this was happening, my relationship with Daniel rolled on. He'd stop by Lena's house when we were there, tease us about baby clothes spread all over the couch, and drift off again. There was nothing in his face, nothing in his voice, that told me anything was wrong. Looking back now, I wonder, if you see only what you want to see, is that really seeing it all? 2 weeks before Lena's due date, I went to the mall to pick up a few things. That's where I ran into Vince. He looked startled when he saw me, then guarded. I stared at him, fury rising. All those months of Lena's tears came rushing up. How can you walk around here like nothing's wrong? I snapped. His eyebrows shot up. What are you talking about? You left Lena pregnant and alone, I said, voice shaking. 9 months, Vince. She's about to have your baby, and you won't even look at her. He blinked slowly. She's, what? There was real confusion in his voice. She's due in 2 weeks, I insisted, suddenly less sure of my footing. Not by me, she isn't, he said quietly. We broke up over a year ago. I haven't touched her since. The floor beneath my feet felt unsteady. If it wasn't him, then what? I stammered an apology for confronting him in public. That's when his face hardened. Maybe, he said, you should ask your boyfriend why he's always around her. The words slammed into me. I laughed it off in front of him, made some weak excuse, and hurried away. Daniel and Lena had grown up together, of course they were close. Our parents were all best friends. They were like cousins. Surely Vince was just being spiteful, right? That's what I told myself as I drove home, fingers white-knuckled around the steering wheel. But a small, cold stone had settled into my stomach. Have you ever felt truth circling you before your mind is ready to hear it? That night, I tried to shake it off by having a movie night with my youngest sister, Carrie. She was 14 then, all elbows and opinions. I started ranting to her about Vince in the kitchen, about his nerve, about that ugly little comment. I expected her to join in. Instead, her face went oddly still. She stopped loading popcorn into the bowl. When I asked what was wrong, she just muttered, "I really have to pee," and fled to the bathroom. I shrugged, grabbed the snacks, and headed downstairs. As I reached the bottom, I heard voices from the kitchen, Carrie's and Mama's. My name drifted into the air like a warning bell. "You have to tell her, Mama," Carrie was saying, voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore." "Keep your voice down," Mama hissed. "You promised we wouldn't tell her until after the baby was born. It would destroy everything." "She already ran into Vince," Carrie cried. "She's going to figure it out. I can't keep lying. Daniel is the father, and she..." I don't remember crossing the rest of the floor. I just remember standing in the doorway, the grocery bag dropping from my hand, apples rolling across the linoleum. "What did you say?" I asked, and my voice did not sound like my own. Mama spun around. She went pale in an instant. Carrie clapped her hands over her mouth and burst into tears. I barely heard the rest. Bits and pieces flowed in my memory even now. A late summer party at someone's house when I was visiting my grandmother. Too much beer. Lena and Daniel disappearing into a back bedroom. Lena missing her period a month later and realizing what had happened. She had gone to Daniel. They were both ashamed, both afraid. Rather than tell me, they'd told their parents. The Martins told the Bakers told my parents, and between them all, they decided to manage it. They told themselves that I was delicate, that I was in love, that if they waited until the baby was born, somehow they could introduce this disaster in a more gentle way. In the meantime, I had gone to appointments and parenting classes and baby name sessions, completely unaware I was helping to prepare my boyfriend's child with my best friend. Everyone knew. My brothers. My older sister. Lena's brothers. Daniel's family. My parents. Everyone except me. Have you ever had a whole roomful of people pull away a curtain at the same time and realize your life was a stage set they all helped build? I was sick for 3 days. Not just heartbroken, physically sick. I couldn't eat. I couldn't stop shaking. I lay in my bed while Mama hovered in the doorway, murmuring that they'd only kept it from me to protect me. Protect me from what? The truth was already here. I ignored Daniel's calls. Lena texted me endlessly, begging for a chance to explain. But what explanation is there for asking someone to hold your hand through a pregnancy while you hide that the baby belongs to the man she plans to marry? Then one afternoon, Mrs. Baker, Daniel's mother, came into my bedroom while I was curled around a pillow, too tired to cry anymore. She perched on the edge of the bed and told me I needed to consider forgiveness. Lena is scared and alone, she said. The baby will need you. Daniel made a mistake, but he loves you. Don't throw away a lifetime over one night. I stared at the wall. I couldn't even look at her. Inside, something quiet and sturdy started forming, like a shell. 2 weeks later, Lena went into labor. Daddy came into my room, gentle as he could be, and said they were heading to the hospital. She'd lost a lot of blood, he said. It was serious. I want to go with you, I whispered. Please. Mama stepped in then. No, she said. You just cause a scene. They need calm, not drama. We'll tell you how it goes when we get back. I need you here, I begged. I can't sit alone in this house while. You're not the only one in pain, she snapped. Try not to be selfish. Then they left. Both of them. Off to sit in a waiting room and hold hands with the parents of the girl and the boy who had blown my whole world apart. I lay there in the empty house, listening to the refrigerator hum and the clock tick in the hallway. At some point, the grief curled up on itself and hardened into rage. I got up, dragged a duffel bag from my closet, and started shoving clothes inside. Underwear, jeans, a worn sweatshirt. I grabbed my small stash of cash from a shoebox, my diploma, my favorite photo of me and Carrie from a summer lake trip. I didn't have a plan, just one loud thought in my head: I cannot stay here another minute. Then my phone buzzed. A text from my older sister, Nora. It's a girl. There was a photo attached, a wrinkled, beautiful newborn with a full head of dark hair. They named her Mara, the message continued. The name Lena and I had chosen, right there on my tiny bedroom floor, when I still believed we were on the same side. A second text came a few minutes later. We're all headed out with the Martins and Bakers to celebrate. Wish you were here. That was it. That was the moment something inside me snapped right down the middle. Have you ever realized, all at once, that the people you thought would walk through fire to protect you are clinking glasses over the ashes? Within an hour, I was at the bus station. By nightfall, I was on a Greyhound heading west, knuckles pressed to the cold window glass. I left my parents a short note: I'm safe. I'm going away. Please don't try to find me. Of course they tried. They called, they left messages, they reported me missing. I ignored it all. It hurt to breathe their names. I was 18 years old, heartbroken, and more alone than I'd ever been, but stubbornness kept my feet moving. I landed in a big desert city hours away, drawn there only because I'd once seen it on a postcard. I rented a bunk in a cheap hostel, found a job stocking shelves on the night shift, and enrolled in the local high school to finish my senior credits. Those first months were hard. I burned dinners, got lost on buses, and cried in public bathrooms when bills were due. But God sends us people, sometimes, right when we think we've run out of road. For me, that person was David. David was 21, lanky, with kind eyes and a laugh that made you want to join in even when you didn't know the joke. He worked days at a mechanic's shop, nights at a diner. He had his own mess with his family, nothing like mine, but enough that he knew what a broken kid on the run looked like. We met at the laundromat, of all places. My quarters jammed in the machine, I cursed under my breath, and he came over with a screwdriver and a grin. 10 minutes later, my clothes were spinning, and I had a new friend. He and his roommates eventually offered me their couch, then a corner of their tiny living room. They taught me how to budget, how to cook a decent pot of beans, how to call the power company when something went wrong instead of just crying about the bill. Little by little, the ache in my chest eased enough that I could breathe without feeling like I was choking. I told David my story in pieces over greasy diner fries. He didn't flinch. He didn't tell me to go back. He just listened. A year passed. I finished high school. On my 19th birthday, David showed up with a cupcake and a paper crown from the dollar store. "Try it on," he said. "You made it another year. That's worth celebrating." Somewhere between the burned dinners and the paper crowns, friendship turned into something deeper. We moved to a new city together after he inherited a little money from his grandfather and decided it was time for a fresh start. We found a cramped apartment in a city across the country, the kind where the walls are paper thin and you can hear your neighbor sneeze. We got cheap jobs. I enrolled in a small college, and David threw himself into starting a little business repairing appliances. We were both still rough around the edges, still dragging around wounded hearts. Getting married at 21 might sound foolish, and maybe it was, but one afternoon we simply looked at each other and realized we were done running separate races. We went down to the courthouse in jeans and sneakers and signed the papers. If I'm honest with you, child, I didn't yet understand the full weight of what love really was. I loved David, but I wasn't deeply in love in that fairy tale way you see in movies. He, though, treated me with a kind of steady, patient devotion I had never known. Over the years, while we built his business together and I stacked my college classes on top of part-time work, that devotion grew roots. We had our share of arguments and lean months, but the ground beneath my feet felt different with him. Safe. Not perfect, but solid. By the time I was 25, I finally saw a therapist, sat in a quiet room, and started unpacking the old hurt I'd locked away. Some wounds stop bleeding long before they stop aching. By my early 30s, David's company had grown into something respectable. I joined full-time after finishing school, helping with the books and the logistics. We bought a modest house, planted flowers in the front yard, and painted the kitchen a warm yellow. I didn't realize until much later that I'd chosen the same shade as Lena's nursery. Memory sneaks in like that. We welcomed 2 little boys into the world, years apart, and for a while, my past felt like an old photograph tucked in the back of a drawer, still there, but no longer burning my fingers to touch. And then, nearly 15 years after I had boarded that bus, an email appeared in my inbox from a name I did not know. "Hi," it said. "My name is Emma. I think I'm your niece." I stared at the screen, heart thudding. Nora's oldest girl, maybe? I wrote back carefully, asking who her parents were. She told me, my sister Nora and James, Daniel's older brother. I pushed my chair back from the desk and just sat there, staring out the window. Have you ever felt the past knock on your door so politely that you don't recognize the sound at first? Emma explained she'd found my name on some old letters in her mom's closet. Nobody talked about me much, she said, but she'd pieced together that I was the aunt who'd moved away. She wanted to know me. We began exchanging messages, safe, simple ones at first. How was school? Did she like art? I learned that my siblings all had children now. 10 nieces and nephews in total. Then one day, Emma mentioned that Uncle Daniel and Aunt Lena had 3 children, the oldest, a girl about Emma's age, and 2 younger boys. The girl's name? Mara. I had to stand up and walk around the room when I read that. That name I'd whispered with Lena in my childhood bedroom had grown into a real girl out there in the world, calling my old boyfriend Daddy. Emma didn't know the story. Nobody had told her why I left. I tried to keep my answers gentle. I told her sometimes grown-up relationships get complicated, and some distances are healthier to keep. It felt wrong to pour all my pain into a 14-year-old's lap. Months passed. Then early in the pandemic, another email came from Emma. This one was heavier. She wrote about how the shutdowns had hurt my parents' finances. Daddy's hours had been cut, Mama's side job had dried up, and they were behind on the mortgage. My brothers had lost work, too. Emma said there'd been a lot of fighting, a lot of slammed doors. Why did a child know all that? Because children always know more than we think. I felt a familiar guilt stir. I had run and built a new life, leaving my family to clean up the mess of my absence. At least, that's what the guilty voice in my head whispered. I told David about the email that night at the kitchen table, our boys asleep in the next room. He listened, stirring his coffee, and then reached for my hand. "We're okay, financially," he said. "If helping them with the house won't destroy your peace, we can do that. But only if you're ready." Have you ever stood at a crossroads where both paths hurt, just in different ways? After a lot of talking, and more than a few tears, I decided to reach out. Not to Daniel. Not to Lena. But to Daddy. His voice on the phone sounded older, thinner, but when he realized it was me, he started to cry. "Baby girl," he kept saying. "Baby girl, is it really you?" We arranged a visit. David and I flew back to my home state with our boys. 15 years had carved lines into my parents' faces, turned my siblings from teenagers into worn adults. Walking into that old house felt like stepping onto a stage I'd abandoned mid-performance. We talked for hours that first night. I told them about my life, my husband, my children. They told me about jobs, illnesses, who had moved where. The big, ugly story from the past sat in the middle of the room like a silent guest. We circled it, brushed it with sideways glances, but didn't touch it much. I simply said I had been deeply hurt, and I had needed to go. We agreed on something like a truce. Not closeness, not yet, but a cautious, fragile connection. I offered to help with a chunk of the mortgage, on one condition: my life with David and our boys stayed separate from Daniel and Lena. I did not want to see them, talk to them, or hear regular updates. Mama pursed her lips when I said that, but she nodded. For the moment. The week went by in a strange mix of nostalgia and discomfort. I played board games with nieces and nephews, including Emma. I drank coffee with my brothers on the porch. I watched Daddy fall asleep in his recliner and wondered when he'd become an old man. When it was almost time to fly back home, Mama pulled me into the kitchen. "We need to talk about Daniel and Lena," she said. "No," I replied softly. "We really don't." Her eyes flashed. "You can't hold on to this forever. They've suffered, too. They want to apologize, to make things right. I want my family back together. All of it." "That's not possible," I said. My voice was steady, though my hands shook. "I can have a relationship with you and Daddy, with my brothers and sisters. But not with them. I wish them no harm. I just don't want them in my life." Mama's lips tightened. "Do you realize how selfish that sounds?" There it was again, that word that had been flung at me the day I begged her not to leave me alone while she went to celebrate the birth of my ex-boyfriend's child. I took a slow breath. "You can choose, Mama," I said. "You can keep being close to them. I won't ask you to stop. But I am allowed to decide who sits at my table. She said, fine, in that way that means anything but. We left a few days later. I thought perhaps time and distance would let the tension cool. I was wrong. 2 days after we got home, my phone rang with a number from my hometown. I almost didn't answer it. I wish I hadn't. Hello? This is Mrs. Baker, came the voice on the other end, Daniel's mother. Your mother gave me your number. We need to talk. I froze. She barreled on. Your coming back has stirred everything up again. Daniel and Lena are beside themselves. You owe them a conversation. They can't heal until you sit down and forgive them. Owe them. The word rattled around in my skull. Without a word, I hung up. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I called Mama. Why did you give her my number? I demanded. To fix this mess, she said. We're all suffering because you refuse to let go. I am tired of tiptoeing around your bitterness. You could heal this family if you would just talk to them. There it is again, I said quietly. You're asking me, once more, to carry everybody's comfort on my back. She started crying, accusing me of tearing people apart, of making her sick with worry, of keeping her from her grandsons. The familiar guilt rose in my throat, but this time something else rose with it, resolve. I won't do this, I said. Not again. If you can't respect my boundary, I will step back. And I did. I stopped answering her calls for a while. Still, at night, lying beside David, listening to our youngest snore softly through the baby monitor, doubts gnawed at me. Was I cruel? Had I overreacted all those years ago? Didn't good daughters forgive? Then I would remember 18-year-old me sitting in that quiet house while my parents toasted the baby named with my help and born from my boyfriend's betrayal, and my spine would straighten again. 2 years slipped by. Life filled up with things like kindergarten registrations and late-night fevers. My relationship with my youngest sister, Carrie, who had gone no contact with our parents herself at 20, grew strong. We talked every day, sending photos of our kids back and forth. I reached out to my brothers and to Nora as well. With Nora it was trickier, she is married to James, after all. There were stretches where we didn't speak, especially when she was caught in the crossfire of family drama. But over time, we found a quiet lane of our own. I came to love my nieces and nephews deeply, even if I skipped certain birthdays where Daniel and Lena would be present. Mama, though, Mama did not let go. When I had my daughter, our third child, something in her obsession sharpened. The calls multiplied. Not once a day, but dozens of times. Some days, 100. If I didn't answer, she'd move on to David, leaving long messages about how I was breaking her heart, how her blood pressure was through the roof, how the stress might kill her. Have you ever carried a phone around your house like a bomb, afraid to look at it, afraid not to? One evening, exhausted from caring for 3 little ones, I called Daddy instead. I told him everything. Not just about Mama's calls now, but about the hurt from years ago I had never really laid at his feet. I cried harder than I had in decades. He listened, quietly. I should have protected you better, he said finally. I'm sorry. Something changed after that conversation. The calls from Mama slowed, then nearly stopped. I found out later why. That August, Daddy filed for divorce. He never told me exactly what broke inside their marriage, only that years of denial and choosing appearances over truth had worn him down. Mama spiraled. She called me again and again from different numbers until I finally changed mine. One of my brothers later told me she was struggling with depression and anxiety and had lost many of the friends she'd once tried so hard to impress. I wish I could tell you I felt nothing but relief. The truth is more complicated. Grief and anger can live in the same house. I mourned the mother I wished I had, even as I protected my children from the one I actually did. Protecting yourself is not the same thing as punishing others. As for Daniel and Lena, they drifted further into the background of my life. I didn't follow their updates. I knew only what filtered through reluctantly from Nora and James. They still lived in town, their kids were growing, they argued a lot. Their marriage, it seemed, carried its own cracks. Last summer, James knocked on my door during a visit to our city. In his hand, he held an envelope. My name was written on the front in a handwriting I recognized instantly, even after all these years. Lena's. She asked me to give you this, he said. No pressure. Read it, don't read it. I promised only to deliver it. I took the envelope. It felt heavier than paper should feel. For weeks, I kept that letter in my nightstand drawer. Sometimes, late at night, I'd open the drawer and stare at it. Did it hold an apology? A justification? A detailed confession of exactly how long the affair had gone on before that party? David told me he would support whatever choice I made. If you read it and it hurts too much, he said, we'll burn it together in the backyard. If you don't read it, that's okay too. Closure doesn't always come from other people's words. So far, I haven't opened it. Maybe one day, when the past feels even further away. Maybe never. Have you ever wondered if some answers only reopen questions you've finally learned to live with? These days, I pour my energy into the family I built, 3 loud children, a patient husband, sisters-in-law and brothers-in-law who know me only as the woman I grew into, not the shattered girl who boarded a bus long ago. I share recipes with Carrie, swap holiday stories with Nora, send birthday gifts to Emma and the other nieces and nephews when I can. And Mama, Daniel, and Lena live on in my life mostly as lessons, about what happens when adults value comfort over honesty, when they ask the wounded child to carry everyone else's peace. Child, if someone ever tells you that your boundaries are selfish because they inconvenience them, remember this old woman's story. You are allowed to step away from the table, even if it leaves an empty chair. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you for keeping me company. Stories like this are heavy, but they're lighter when we carry them together. If this story stirred something in you, memories of your own family tangles, perhaps, or questions about forgiveness and distance, would you gently tap that like button? It lets more folks find these tales and helps keep dust of old days rocking on its little porch in this big online world. And if you feel like it, share in the comments. Would you open that letter? Would you sit down with an old betrayal if it came knocking, or would you let it rest? There's no one right answer. We're all just doing the best we can with the hearts we've got. Thank you for listening, sweetheart. Turn off the light when you're ready. The past will still be there tomorrow, but tonight, you've given it a kinder place to rest.